Hey, good morning, everyone. Why don't we begin? And I would like to welcome you all to the workshop on smart meter opt-out options. The three applications that are being considered together are A1103-014, A1103-015, and A1107-020. And I would like to remind everyone that the purpose of the workshop today is to evaluate the technical possibilities and costs of the different opt-out options. And so we're focusing on how the various options that have been proposed could be implemented. There have been some elements in the opt-out proposals that were submitted that were outside of the scope of today's workshop, and those elements we're not going to be discussing. Okay. I would like to have everyone consider this workshop an informal process. It's a means for all of us to get more information on the various opt-out options. And we're not transcribing today's workshop. And I do see that there are some people who are videotaping here, but I do want to note that to the extent that there is considered an official record of today's workshop, that official record is going to be the webcast version that we have currently in place. Okay, a couple of ground rules as we begin. First of all, as you see, we're in the auditorium, and I have both webcast and a listen-only line for those who cannot attend in person. Therefore, I ask all of you, please speak into the microphones. Otherwise, those who are listening via webcast or telephone aren't going to hear what you want to say. We have two people who will be walking around with wireless microphones and providing them to you as you have questions. Raise your hand. It sounds like school, but please raise your hand, and we will get to you. And Alok here has one of the microphones, and Sherry back there has the other. So raise your hand. One of them will get to you, and then when the microphone is there, then you can speak. Okay. Anybody who's listening, either via webcast or on the listen-only line, if you would like to ask a question of any of the parties who have proposed an opt-out option, please email Marzia Zafar. Her email address is zaf@cpuc.ca.gov, and she will show me those emails as they come. If the emails are outside of the scope, I will note that they are outside of the scope. However, I will print them, and I will put them into our correspondence file. Okay, a couple other things. We have new security procedures in place at the PUC, and one of them is metal detector. According to the CHP requirements, everyone must go through the metal detector. So if you leave this area for the breaks, to use the restrooms, for lunch, when you come back, please make sure you have time to come back and go through the metal detectors. Okay. Before we go actually into the workshop, what I wanted to do is have three people from the Commission come up and speak, all of them on concerns that have been raised in numerous emails that I've received. One is concerning the confidentiality of consumer data, the cost for the smart meter program in general, and also just what happens if you have a complaint and you would like to file a complaint about the smart meters. So without further ado, let me introduce first Marzia Zafar.
Hello, my name is Marzia Zafar. I wanted to explain the recently adopted decision by the Commission that prohibits anyone from invading your privacy via the smart meters. The Commission last month voted to adopt a decision which legally prohibits anyone from using the data from a smart meter for any other purposes other than billing you and using it for energy-related purposes such as energy efficiency studies. Using it for marketing or any other purpose is strictly prohibited unless the customer itself gives his or her consent. The utilities always have had access to your usage information in order to bill you correctly. What a smart meter does is give the utility and the customer access to hourly information rather than monthly information with the analog meter. It is technologically impossible for the smart meter or the utility to know how much each appliance in your home uses. This notion that somehow the utility will know what you are using and it can turn it off is totally impossible and completely inaccurate. If anyone has needs further information on the privacy decision, you can email me and I can send you the full text of the privacy decision that was adopted unanimously by the Commission last month. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Carol Brown, and I have been the recipient of a lot of phone calls from numerous people who either want to chat about smart meters, make complaints about them, or have their feelings kind of transmitted to me, and then I do work for President Peavy with the idea that, of course, I would then report to him from the messages I'm receiving either on the phone or via email. And I do have to say I receive quite a number of messages where people will say ratepayers shouldn't pay anything. It should be the utility that pays for any opt-out plan. And that may sound very appealing, except I'm going to just spend a minute on the reality of life that there really is no such thing as the utility with a pocket of money. The contract that we, the state of California, has with, and I'll use the electric and gas utilities as an example, private investors fund those companies. And our contract with the company is, you spend money procuring gas and electricity, you build transmission lines, and then you build distribution systems so that you can deliver the electricity or the gas to the individual customer's home or business. And then our agreement back with them is, we will then allow you to collect the cost of that from ratepayers, and we will give you a return on the investment your shareholders made fronting all of those funds. That's how utilities actually do make money, and that's how they stay in business. But if they weren't doing that, then that means, for example, the state of California would have to, with California's money, which of course we have none at the moment, would in a sense have to be performing that same function. It is just being performed by private companies, which means ratepayers, I mean, the sad true story is, ratepayers really pay the cost of everything that is the authorized business of a utility. And I know a lot of you here today do not like the fact, but we did authorize the utilities to put in smart meters. They didn't just decide that one morning on their own, wake up and figure out they can make more money by putting in smart meters. We as a commission authorized this years ago. And just like every other capital investment, the shareholders fronted the initial funds for that. And now you, as the ratepayers, me as a ratepayer, we are all now paying for the smart meters as ratepayers. If we have an opt-out program, what we need to decide is how much the individual customer who wants to opt out, what would be a fair amount, if any, for that customer to pay, and what should be subsidized by the other ratepayers. That's our total source of funds, really, are ratepayers, either the individual ones or the collective ratepayers. So today, when we are talking about who pays for opt-out proposals, that's really the paradigm that we're working with. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Harold Williams. I am the supervisor for the Consumer Affairs Branch. Consumer Affairs Branch is the area that we actually handle complaints coming from the consumers a lot of times that are against different utilities. What I really want to just talk about is a quick process that we actually have available for individuals who want to file a complaint based on, and I guess the area we're talking about right now is against smart meters. What you can do is either go to our website. You can file a complaint based on just clicking on complaint on our website, and you can actually send a complaint to us, and we actually do take that information and put it into our system. You can write us, you can email us, you can fax us. And what we do is, a lot of times you're wondering what happens with these particular complaints, but what we actually do is we put it in our database. So, a lot of times you do get return responses based on, what the commission's stance is at this particular time. Obviously, there's no decisions. I get complaints based on opt out, don't want it, health issues. I get a lot of those particular type of complaints where we until we actually have a decision, and we're not the policymakers in the Consumer Affairs branch, but what we do is uphold based on the policies that are given to us. So at this time, what we do is we just give you a response that to let you know that we acknowledge that we did receive your complaint and that your complaint is being tabulated and put into our system. So therefore, if our leaders actually do need to have information or numbers based on the number of complaints that are coming in for a certain issue, we are able to code those particular complaints that you have and have the information at hand for them to actually help them with their decision making. I'll be here if individuals need more information on our complaint process. Thank you.
Okay, let me go over real quickly how we're going to be going forward today. Okay, as you see up here, we've got the agenda. We have quite a number of topics that we would like to cover in today's workshop. And the bulk of the time will be spent discussing the 3 opt-out options that have been proposed. And what I've asked is, and I really do thank these gentlemen over here who are here to help us explore the technical aspects and really what is the feasibility. I want to explore in as much detail as possible what is the feasibility of every single option that's been proposed. And let me just do a brief introduction. I'm doing it off of my list. Unfortunately, I can't see all the names, and I don't know everyone quite yet. But we have Mark DeVeres-White from Itron, okay, over here. From Silver Spring Networks, we have Don Reeves. From Aclara, Richard Riccardi. Jim Meadows from Pacific Gas and Electric Company. Kenneth DeBoer from Southern California Edison. Ted Regley from San Diego Gas and Electric. And Peter Silla from SoCal Gas. And also we have Tom Roberts from the Commission's Division of Ratepayer Advocates up here. Okay, and given the number of topics to be covered, what I'll do is I'll be starting out each topic and doing just a brief summary of, for the opt-out options, what has been proposed. After that, I will be opening it up for questions, and the questions can be directed to any of the gentlemen that I've just introduced, or to whoever the person was or entity was that had submitted a proposal. Okay. So what I'd like to do first is let's discuss our topics that are pretty much, they're applicable to all of the opt-out options. And the first area, which is meter technology, is something specific that I would like to have some further clarification from the utilities. So there is a slight, division that I made between gas and electric. And I'm assuming, and this is where I would like to be corrected if I'm incorrect, that the technologies for gas and electric transmission are different. Would that be correct? Okay, you're all
Shaking their heads. Is it on?
Okay, and if the light's on, the microphone's on.
Yes, this is Jim Meadows from PG&E. Our technologies are different than just for electric and gas.
Okay, and given the difference in the technology, is it feasible to shut off technology for one and not affect the technology for the other. Or if you were to turn off the transmission on the electric, it necessitates doing something on the gas meters as well.
In my case, they can individually and distinctly be turned off, the radios.
Okay, so you could opt out of one and not opt out of the other.
You can.
Okay, for San Diego.
So for San Diego Gas Electric, our gas information actually uses the same carrier as our electric. We use the Zigbee radios to talk to the gas modules. That information comes back to the electric meter, and then the electric meter then brings the information back. So for us, if you turn off the electric, you do turn off the path for the gas. There is the ability for that gas module to talk to another electric meter if it's in the same geographic area, but that is the difference between PG&E's and SDG&E's technology.
Okay, and then for Edison and SoCal Gas, for your meters, is there any interaction between the Edison electric meter and the SoCal gas meter, or is there contemplated to be any communication or interaction between the two?
For Southern California Edison, no. It's an independent system that is basically a radio mesh system. I think you'll hear that, over and over. And we use our partner is Itron. We use the Itron open-way system, similar to San Diego Gas and Electric, but it is distinctly electric-only system, just serving our customers.
And our system at SoCal Gas is strictly gas only.
Okay, and
we will not use the Edison network at all. We will be building our own communications network.
Okay, thank you. Okay, does anybody have any question on the meter technology at this point? Okay, Mr. Holman, could you please stand up?
Mark, I'm working with Southern Californians for wired solutions to smart meters. So my question is, what are wired solutions to the smart meters?
Okay, we are going to be looking at that as a topic. That is this afternoon. The first topic is going to be the wired, what are wired alternatives to smart meters? Okay, Mr. Hoggy, could you move up, because that way we can have everyone stand, up in front. It'll be a lot easier for those with the microphones.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time or not. I'm curious in the differences, just particularly for PG&E, in the frequency of communications emissions from the gas meter versus the electric. Can they be, if the electric is shut off and there's only gas, does it operate at can the operations and communications be controlled or set, whether manually or automatically, to operate at preset times, or that kind of stuff, if this is the appropriate time.
Okay, are you referring to your proposal that there be the snap reads, or actually DRA, I think that's snap reads, or?
That was DRA's proposal, and I'm just curious about, I guess that goes to that, so it should be covered later, that's fine.
Or can you respond now, Mr. Evans?
Yeah, so electric technology works in that messages are, very tiny messages are sent all the time through the day, and we collect 6 times a day the reads from a given meter. In the case of the gas, we read the meter, we collect 4 times a day on gas meters. So again, they're on different distinct networks and different distinct drivers of when they report in their reads.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. And, all right, okay.
Patrick Goldie, a question for Carol Brand is about the privacy aspects of you're saying the utilities are not going to share this information with anyone.
Okay, the privacy.
Well, no, so it's a technology. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
We can both answer it.
Technology. What's to stop third parties since these are being broadcast, what's to stop the third party from picking up these signals and using information which comes from digital signal processor, which is Silver Strings, I guess, we need to answer that, to identify which appliances are being used?
Okay, well,
Yeah.
So I'll try, and I'll probably need some help, as part of SDG&E's open-way system. Those signals are encrypted and have numerous keys, and security was a huge issue when we went down this path. I know Itron has invested a lot of money in their system. We have invested a lot of money looking at it, and we've actually hired third parties to try to hack into it. And we're using the same type of encryption that's used in the banking industry.
So Lou Santilli with Itron.
Oh, you need a mic.
I'm sorry. Excuse me, Lou Santilli with Itron. Actually, for the security, we do comply to the NERC and SIP requirements for NIST, and the data is digitally encrypted signed, so they are protected from both sides without any possibility of being able to decipher the data that's being transmitted.
On the SoCal gas side, all we're transmitting is a module identifier number and 12 hourly meter reads. There's no customer information in our transmission, and that too is uniquely encrypted for each meter, each module.
Continuing on that question, a year and a half ago, InGuardian did some tests on these smart meters, and were able to get past the encryption and hack into the meter, but not only that, hack into the grid. In other words, because technologically these meters do broadcast their signals, they create a vulnerability to the entire electrical grid. Now, how do you respond to that?
I'll take it first from the gas side because I think we are a little bit different. We're not replacing our meters. It's the basic diaphragm meter that's been out there for 100 years. We're simply putting a radio device on that, and the only communication that comes back through to the meter to the module is to reset the clock in the module. So our module doesn't really give access to any of our basic systems.
Right, but that's gas, not electric.
And for PG&E, we agree with what Ted said. We have very similar protections in our system. In fact, I'll hand it over to Don Reeves from my technology vendor in a minute. But we have not and do not expect anybody to hack through. We do similar testing that Ted does and have found the system secure.
It's Don Reeves with Silver Spring. So Jim is correct. We've run multiple penetration tests, both SSN independently, SSN jointly with PG&E, SSN with other vendors, other utilities, both the United States and around the world. And there have been no systemic vulnerabilities identified that would allow any sort of access into the system.
okay, thank you. We also received 2 email questions, one from Tiffany Reese and one from Liz Barris. Both of those emails ask questions that are outside of the scope of today's workshop. I'm not going to be reading them as a result, but I will be printing them and I will be putting them in the correspondence file. Okay, Mr. Weil.
James Weil for Aglet Consumer Alliance. We heard a little bit of information about the duty cycles that the PG&E's meters were going to operate under. My question is, how do the parties gain access to detailed information about duty cycles, frequencies, time bursts, magnitudes, times of day, and so forth? Can we do that through the ordinary discovery process?
Okay, and exactly why would you be using that? Is it directly relevant to your opt-out option?
Absolutely. My opt-out option or Aglet's opt-out option includes the creation of safe perimeter distances around homes or businesses. And in order to assess what is a safe distance, we need to know the duty cycles associated with these things. I think it falls within the scope of meter technology.
Okay, Mr. Weil, the purpose for the opt-outs, and I think I do need to remind everyone, whether someone wishes to opt out, they can have any number of reasons or no reason. What we want to do is create a program where people who wish to opt out may do so, and they don't need to specify a reason. To the extent that you're looking at an option or proposing an option that is for one specific reason, I would not like to have those considered in this workshop today, because we are looking at general information. As we get further into a proceeding and you have specific purposes for whatever opt-out option that you're proposing, you can do that at that time. But at this time, I would like to look at all of the options from a higher level so that we can understand even if it's feasible. Now, you may be asking questions for an opt-out option that may not be considered feasible. So that's why I would like to look at feasibility now. Specifics we can get to at a later time. Ms. Bauer.
I'm going to defer to Sage.
Okay, and did you wish to speak at all, Ms. Bauer? Or?
Yes. I'll let Cindy speak. All right. Cindy Sage, Sage Associates. I don't know if Ms. Mauer and I have the same question, but my question goes back to Mr. Meadows' comment that PG&E collects data 6 times a day and 4 times a day depending on the meter. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. We've done a substantial amount of radio frequency testing on meters in PG&E and Edison territory. And what we find is that the frequency, radio frequency burst is quite frequent. So how do you explain the difference?
The question is starting to get outside of the scope of the opt-out option.
Why are there why is there such a discrepancy between what you're indicating, the measures test, and what we
This is outside of the scope of today's workshop. So, yeah.
They do not operate in the way that Mr. Meadows has indicated. Could it be explained why?
Okay, that is outside the scope. We're not addressing that. Okay. Ms. Mauer, yes.
Thank you. This question actually relates to are there differences in technology between the meters utilized by each utility? So my question is about what Mr. Meadows had said. He said that the meter sends tiny messages throughout the day. So my question is, and I'd like to know from each of the utilities and or the meter manufacturers, is what is the length of the pulse in milliseconds, please?
Okay, would you have that information?
Well, let me, if I can, start by reminding our audience that PG&E does appreciate the need for customer choice and opt-out, and our proposal is to turn the radio off. So when the radio is off, there would be no pulse and no transmission at all. So that's our alternative we're here to talk about today.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Nobody's going to answer my question.
Well, on the SoCal gas side, our modules will communicate for 2 reasons. The first is for the the consumption data. That will happen 4 times a day, every 6 hours, for 70 milliseconds each. There will also be alarms sent when there's tampering with the meter. That transmission will only occur when there's a tampering with the meter, and that transmission, I believe, is about 2/10 to 3/10 of a second per occasion. 2/10 to 3/10 of a second
How
per
many times a
occasion.
day?
Only when the meter is tampered with.
Oh.
So our estimate is that our module will be transmitting somewhere in the range of 2.5 to 3 minutes per year. It's battery powered. It has per year. It's battery powered. So when it's not transmitting, it's just sitting there like any battery powered device.
And 6 times a day?
4 times a day.
4 times.
Lou Santilli with Atron. The open-way system is a pole response system, so it actually responds less than a minute a day total cumulative, and it will bubble up or send up alerts and alarms according to what the system design is, such that it would be tamper theft, or outage information.
How long is the pulse?
So the pulse length will vary according to the meter firmware length, and outside of this conversation we can have that, or I can forward it to the DRA if necessary.
You don't know?
The answer is more complex than a simple, it's X number of pulses per day. Because the data
I mean, the one pulse, how long is the pulse?
So the data is transmitted in packets. Each packet is several milliseconds long. It's true.
3?
I will get that answer.
This is Tom Roberts from DRA. I just wanted to add that we're talking about opt-out options, and we got responses back from data requests about what type of signal is left in a radio off option. And I can't comment on what SDG&E said because their responses were confidential, but all the other utilities said there are no residual signals in a radio off option. So for the point of this discussion today, I think it is relevant subsequently to talk about what radiation there might be, what radio signals there might be. But for the purposes of a radio off option, they have said that when it's off, it's off.
I thought we were talking about the difference in technology. Wait, can you just...
So that's saying that all the
My
technologies...
question was about the differences in the technologies with the different industries. And we heard from SoCal Gas, thank you, and I've heard from Itron. I'd really like to hear from PG&E, SCE, and some of the other meter manufacturers. What is the length of the RF pulse that's being transmitted? Thank you.
Sure. This is Don Reeves from Silver Spring. So I don't have the specific duration of the pulse level, but you can get that. It is measured in milliseconds. And much like, I believe, Itron system works, ours is also similar in that there's fundamentally two types of transmissions. There's those initiated by the back office in order to read the data. That's happening, as Jim said, 6 times a day. And then there's network management traffic happening at internal frequencies throughout the day in order to maintain the mesh network. And those are smaller duration messages happening between neighbors on the ground.
Okay. This gentleman's been waiting for a while.
Yeah, I'd just like to say my name is Jeff Nordahl, and I think a lot of the confusion here and why we're trying to get, I know specifically for PG&E, about the duration of the pulse and such is because there have been information published by PG&E to customers that says that the meters are only on for 45 seconds a day, and so that's a lot of the public, I think, has been misled by the concept thinking it only comes on 45 seconds a day. They don't think that's a big deal. So if it actually, the meters, especially the electric meters, are indeed on all day long, constantly pulsing, but for very short amounts of time, I think that would be valuable for customers to understand and for us all to know. And it is a little frustrating if no one can actually tell us what the actual technology is, so we can make educated decisions on what the technology actually is and what it's doing.
Okay, thank you. Is there, okay, Ms. Yeah, she can hold it over there.
Thank you. Mary Beth Brandon from the Ecological Options Network, and I'd like to know from all of the utilities what the emissions from, are you disregarding the emissions from the SMPS that I understand, maybe not for the gas
Could we take
meters,
this offline so that we can, yeah, the emissions, okay, I would like to get to the options. And as I said, these are options regardless of whether or not, you know, whatever reason you wish to opt out of having a smart meter. So I know you're going specifically towards your proposed opt-out option. Let's focus on that, you know, some of the specifics, especially about the emissions and everything else, after we've had a look at least at what the options are. Let's look at the possibility, feasibility of the analog meter option and what you're proposing. That's really what I would like to get some more information on. Okay, Mr. Martino, do you have something that's related to the meters?
It's really a procedural question.
Yes.
Because the PG&E representative says that what they're going to propose is that the radio be shut off.
That's correct.
Now, if we think that that is insufficient, are we able to make that case here in this workshop? And if we're not, because that might be outside your purview, then they should not be able to make the case that it is.
If they have, okay, they've made their proposal, you've made your proposal. Okay, I would like to look at just the feasibility of doing it. And I understand that, you know, the analog meter, there are certain, you know, reasons why they have been proposed by various interveners in the various proceedings, and also by, you know, some of the applicants. You know, we will be considering those opt-out options, but when it comes to why is one better than the other, and, you know, we're not going to be discussing why is one better than the other, and why should one be considered, you know, to do X or Y. And we're not going to consider that here. We're looking at the options. What is the feasibility? And yes, and we're not, okay, and I will, you know, if you feel that any of the utilities have said something outside of the scope, you may remind me as well. No, I would appreciate that. Okay? Question. Thank you. Go ahead.
Josh Hart, Director of StopSmartMeters.org. My understanding of the reason why we're all here today, the reason why we're sitting here discussing opt-out options, is that thousands of people from the public come forward, submitted written complaints about health effects. Now that is one reason why someone would want to opt out. I am not understanding why it is inadmissible or irrelevant to this discussion questions regarding the power of the transmitters, because obviously if you choose to opt out and choose to keep your analog or get your radio switched off, why it's irrelevant what the power of the transmitters on your neighboring homes and in the neighborhood is, I think we need to understand those facts in order to arrive at a decision and an opt-out program that will serve the original purposes for the public who in thousands came to the Public Utilities Commission with complaints. So I think Cindy Sage's inquiry is very relevant, and I would again pose the question which we have never heard from utilities, and that is, what is the peak pulse of these meters on our homes?
Mr. Hart, as I said, we're not going to be considering right now. Okay, I am going to ask that, you know, whether you appreciate or disapprove of comments being made, that there be no response. I would like to have a day where we can move forward and get these topics covered. Okay, Mr. Hart, what we need to do first, even before that, is to look at what has been proposed. And we have three options that have been proposed. A wired version of whatever, a smart meter, a radio off version, and an analog version. Those are three opt-out options that have been proposed. What I need to find out before I can even go into anything else is what's the feasibility of even looking at these options. You know, if the analog option is going to be pursued, I want to make sure that, you know, that really is a viable option. I don't want to all of a sudden come to the end of the proceeding and find out that I've decided, wow, this is the option that should be offered, and it's not really feasible. So today is a feasibility. You know, there's going to be other opportunities to go into the further detail that you want to, you know, if we go with an analog option, or if PG&E is proposed, or any of the utilities has proposed radio off, or something else. You know, what else? You know, what are the ramifications of those options? You know, we've got, you know, more discussion into each of the specific opt-out options, but I do want to look at, you know, is it cost effective? Is it even feasible to use these types of options?
My understanding is that one of the options on the table is to have safe zones around people's homes who opt out. Now, the nature of those safe zones and the distance required, it seems to me, is directly relevant to the power of the transmitters on neighboring homes. So why aren't we
I'm not
considering
quite sure. We are looking at, and I have asked what is the appropriate range. And there are some considerations concerning those ranges, and that is an issue that we're going to be discussing. So
why can't the utilities answer that question now? I mean, it seems like a very simple question.
Well, answer the question, please.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Directly relevant to this proceeding.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. Just as a brief note, Mr. Shames from UCAN has sent an email. I do want to remind everybody, if you are a listen only, please mute your phone. Everybody, even though you're listen only here, we can't hear the sounds off of your telephone. Everybody else who is on the telephone line can. So please mute your phone so that it is not disruptive. Okay? Okay, Mr. Hart, as I said, we are not going to be discussing those issues at this point, and that is the extent. I am going to ask anyone who wishes to continue to be disruptive to please leave. I know there's a lot of questions, however, I would like to cover them, and my options are, if it is too disruptive today, that I conclude the workshop and then we can reconvene at a different time. That's the options for today. So I would like to continue if I can get all of your cooperation. Okay. And what I'd like to do, though, is I'm going to move on to the next topic because we do have, as I said, quite a full day, and I would like to get everything covered. Okay. The next question that I have on here as the topic is, what are the costs that are considered by the utilities as they set up costs for the opt-out, for somebody who wishes to opt out of the smart meter program? And Mr. Meadows, we'll start with you.
Sure, I don't know where to start. We have filed an application for our opt-out proposal. So our costs are fairly well known, but I'll go through them quickly. We have an initial field visit by the technician to turn both the electric and gas meters off. After that, there would be monthly meter reading by one of our meter readers. We would continue to monitor the mesh network and the collection of reads from the meters that are still on, that have not opted in the program. And to the extent you see a degradation in the mesh, because each of the mesh technology does sort of require each of the meters to participate. So when they begin to turn off, we could find that there are gaps in our collection capability. So if we find those, we would put network pull-top devices in to fill that gap. We would institute some IT changes in our back offices so that the systems would know where the various collections are coming from, whether from a manual meter reader or from the automated systems. And then there are customer communications and operation support costs that go along in our filing. So those are the categories anyway.
Okay. Can we hear from Edison next, please?
Sure. We do not have an application of record yet, but we've looked at the application of PG&E, and we've looked at closer. Wow, very close. I'm sorry. We do not have an application of record yet, but if asked to file an application, we've looked at the application of PG&E, and we've looked at how this market has kind of developed at this point. And if you took the point of view that we would favor a radio off option, we would have many of the same costs that Mr. Meadows just mentioned. Customer-related costs, contract development, outreach, education, those are very important. Field-related costs, as was mentioned by Mr. Meadows, field visits to turn the radio on and off, manual meter reading. There are inefficiencies in meter reading routes that would need to be coordinated and need to be synthesized to be able to handle that. Manual service switch, firmware upgrades using an optical probe, configuration changes. Those are some of the field work that we would need to be able to do. Product development costs, both in firmware and software upgrades and field tool upgrades to be able to do this kind of work in the field. Network costs, as was mentioned by Mr. Meadows, filling gaps in the RF mesh network caused by opt-out would be dependent, of course, on assumptions and the take rate of customers who are interested in this particular option. And then troubleshooting through our operations center. We have an operations center that continues to keep an eyes and ears, if you would, on the system health and its operation. Back office costs for developing line item billing data changes, opt-out enrollment procedures, service fee changes, rerouting of over-the-air functions for opt-out accounts because we do a lot of the work over the air in terms of servicing the system and upgrading the system. And then operational process costs of manually handling service orders, creating new meter reading routes, as I previously mentioned, account administration, and then, of course, operational readiness and training. So there'll be some changes in the procedures of how we operate the system.
Okay, thank you. Over to San Diego.
I really don't have anything to add. I think Jim has addressed. We have the exact same issues. We have pretty much the same system as SCE, so those would be the same cost categories for us.
Okay, and for SoCalGas?
I think the only difference between what the others have mentioned is that our modules do not talk to each other. It is not a mesh system. It's a module to a pole top collector, so we wouldn't have the same kinds of network troubleshooting and network issues. Otherwise, we would have the same kinds of, our module requires a field visit to be activated or deactivated, and all of the other costs that the others have mentioned would be appropriate for us.
Okay, and if we were to look at the analog meter option, are there different categories that would need to be considered if, or additional costs that would be incurred if we were to adopt an analog opt-out option?
Well, we think there are different and new and unfortunately increasing costs if we consider analog, which I take to mean mechanical meters. There would be, I mean, PG&E is 86% or so done with our electric deployment. So to make an option available for all of our customers, not just the ones we haven't got to yet, but all of them, it would require us, I suppose, to go find an analog mechanical meters for those that have already been converted. We don't know if there's a ready supply for that. There's procurement costs, handling costs now of 2 meters, 2 technologies, the smart meter and now a mechanical. And so, you know, there would be a new operational cost to consider and would be on top of the costs we already included in our radio off program.
Okay. And
in addition to what Mr. Meadows mentions for SCE, we're about 60% complete, so there are a lot of the mechanical meters still in operation. However, the crux of our business case that we submitted before the Commission and been approved has been to decommission these systems that support the analog meters. The new standard is the smart meter, so all of our back office systems are built and designed to be expanded and extensible for the smart meter system. So we would have to revisit what systems would need to be retained or even rebuilt to support that. And in like fashion that Mr. Meadows mentioned, working with our vendor, we've not found what we believe to be a satisfactory, high-quality product that's in the market or continues to be in the market in the analog meter variety.
okay, Mr. Roberts, did you have something?
Yeah, I think it was at the first PHC there was a comment about new meters not being domestically available, new analog meters. So I wanted to ask, are foreign manufactured electromechanical meters available, or are remanufactured meters available as an option?
You know, sir, thanks for the question, Tom. I mean, we hear rumors to that effect. I'll call it that. The PG&E's current meter suppliers have told us that they no longer manufacture mechanical analog meters. There's, you know, sort of word out there that maybe they are available, but we haven't done any research or proved that it's a viable supplier of meters and that they would meet the standards and specifications we would require.
Louis Sanfilippo Electron, as a major meter manufacturer, we discontinued manufacturing electromechanical meters a little over 4 years ago. and all we manufacture currently are the solid state.
Follow-up question. If there were another source, is there national standards that you would trust to certify a new analog or a remanufactured analog meter?
But we would put them through the testing cases we do on every meter. Yes, we ask them to supply with us and some test results and documentation that they do meet spec, but then we also put meters through our own test cases when we get them in certified.
Hi, my name is Linda Coaches. I'm a San Francisco resident and current PG&E customer, although considering going off-grid at this point. I was wondering what happened to all of the analog meters that have been removed? Were those just recycled, thrown in the garbage? Could those potentially be used as a replacement in cases where customers would prefer to have their analog meter be installed?
Yeah, so the meters are recycled as they come out of service and smart meters go in. Sorry?
Where are they recycled?
I don't have that information with me. I can get an answer to that question.
Okay, Mr. Martino, then Mr. Hollinger in the back.
My question is for the PG&E representative. Suppose it was ultimately discovered that the installation, the forced installation of smart meters on customers' houses was illegitimate because PUC did not have legislative
Mr. Martino,
power.
that is part of the separate application.
I'm talking about costs here. That's what we're discussing. Suppose it was found that those installations were illegitimate, why would not PG&E and all of the utilities that install these meters not have to pick up the costs for having put those meters in the first place?
Yeah. Okay.
I would like to answer that.
Okay, that is not within the scope of these workshops. I know you have a separate application that you have made in a request, and it'll be considered in a separate application. Okay, go ahead.
So I understood that the goal of today's workshop is partly to discuss the technical feasibility and functionalities of different options, and for the utilities to provide some information concerning potential costs and cost drivers of different options. So I actually have a few questions concerning costs, if this is the right time. My first question is for PG&E. One of the options is to do, one of your cost drivers, in fact, the largest unit cost driver for the upfront charge is for the site visit to manually turn off the electric and gas radio signals. What are potential costs and drivers of remotely turning off through a signal the electric radio?
So, thanks for the question. So our system currently does not have a capability. It would, for us to implement our proposal, the radio off program, it would require a field technician visit at this time. Were we to undergo an effort with our technology vendor, Don Reeves, in fact, maybe I'll ask him to add to this, but it would require us to no doubt make changes in both our head-end software system and the firmware that goes in our meters, and then we would go through the expense of certifying, testing, putting those into production, and pushing firmware out to the meters. Quickly, I'll add before Tom picks up, is that that's not possible with our gas module.
Yeah, so we've looked at the work required to enable remote disabling of the radio within the electric meter. As Jim stated, that is something that is feasible. It can be added to our product roadmap. We estimate approximately 6 to 9 months to deliver both the communication capability that we need to add to the firmware as well as the back office software And as Jim said, that needs to go through a testing and validation process before we roll it out. It's probably another 3 to 6 months after that before that would actually be available in the field. Well, so approximately 12 to 15 months by to get it out.
Will PG&E or SSN be able to provide any cost estimates for doing that software development and testing?
I'm sure we would ourselves.
Do you have any numbers now you can share with everybody?
No, I don't have an estimate at this time. Again, my proposal is a field technician visit to turn the radio off.
Yes, but we are examining all of the options, so we do need to consider this.
I understand. So we'll look at that. We do think that there are valid other transactions that can happen at the house while our field technician is there that, of course, you couldn't do even if you had the power to turn it off remotely. Like, for example, put a physical indication, a colored electric meter ring or something of that kind to indicate to our next technicians that come along that radio is off on purpose. So without that, an outage or something else comes up at the customer premise, we wouldn't want the unfortunate happenstance of the next technician to sort of reinstall the meter with a radio on, not knowing that it's supposed to be off.
Thank you. Next question on costs. Your primary non-recurring cost in your application is the cost for doing monthly manual meter reads of any customer who takes your opt-out option. What is the existing cost of your existing option for customers whose meters cannot be read manually to do self-meter reads? And what would be a forecast of costs for anyone who opts out of the smart meter, who takes your opt-out option to do self-read of either a smart meter or an analog meter?
Well, our estimated cost for a self-read, which we don't encourage because it's fraught with mistakes and true-up points and customer annoyance at best, a program like that. But our cost, actually, the way we enabled it is through a plastic card, which customers put in a window. So if a meter reader has to go by and read the read from the front of the house rather than on the meter, it's essentially the same cost to pick that read up.
I'm sorry, you're saying that you need to send out a person to collect the card?
We do. We don't have I'm not aware that we have a program where people can call in their read and stop the meter reader.
Okay, so your existing program that meets the card is somehow left out and that's collected.
That's right.
Question concerning the analog meters. I think I heard your response concerning the recycling of the analog meters that are taken out of service. It sounds like you have at least 10%, 10% would be 500,000 meters that you have not yet replaced. What would be potential costs and feasibility of, and that's much higher than your forecast of potential smart out, opt-out. Smart people opt out from your program of 145,000. What would be the potential cost of taking 150,000, 200,000, whatever, of the existing analog meters and storing them for use for the opt-out analog program?
So we have considered that, treating the mechanical meters that come out of the field. Our studies show that by the time the handling charges, the kind of cleanup and recalibration of those meters, many of which are sort of old and brittle at this point, would in a lot of ways be more expensive than acquiring a new meter. So again, our proposal is to turn the radio off. It's an option available to everybody, whether you've had your meter exchanged yet or
Okay,
not.
Mr. Meadows, we're going to consider all of the options today. Thank you. Mr. Roberts.
I have wanted to follow up on a couple. Marcel, can I pick up on a couple things? First question was when you mentioned that it is possible to do a remote turn-off. PG&E's estimated about $18 million to turn off the meters with a field visit. How does that number compare to your development and testing costs for firmware change, such as would be required to do this remote turn-off? Is that a high number, medium number? That question, I'm sorry, is to Mr. Reeves.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I've got the full details at my disposal right now as to what